get started, jumping right in with Aspen updates in an instant.
All right. Welcome everybody to Aspen Updates in an Instant, where we talk about everything we did last month. And I will start by immediately turning it straight over to Jordan to talk about LIDA.
Okay, so we have, last time we talked, we were going to update the Discover screen just a little bit. So now you'll find when you log in for the first time, we do show some of the browse categories, but for performance, because it was taking a little while to load all of the browse categories, depending on how many browse categories your library had. We now have this load all categories button down here. So you can click that and it will reload. And then the thinking is that the patron has a little bit more time to wait. Or I guess if they're interested in loading all the browse categories, then they're a little bit more tolerant of waiting a little bit longer. So we do then, after you click that button, get these. We also have this load more, which, right, these are only showing a few, there's only one title on this list, or very few, but towards the end of these, we wanted a way to be able to see all of the titles. So we have the load more as well. We are also working on some updates to the placing holds and the freezing holds, where you can do bulk updates. So those will likely come out next week with the Aspen release, but we're just still fine tuning those a little bit. They're not quite ready to show to make sure all of the flows work correctly. But that's another thing that we think we'll be launching next week. So that's all of the LIDA updates in an instant. And I will hand it back to Mark.
Cool, thanks, Jordan. Let me share. Oh, where's my right screen? Sorry. There we go. All righty. So this release, or after the last release, we had a couple of little updates just as we went through and fine-tuned some of the new language functionality and new faceting functionality based off feedback. So thank you to everyone who gave feedback both before and after that release. We really like where we got to with the new faceting functionality and figuring out, making sure that the results that we are showing when you're combining formats and availability and that kind of thing are correct. So we had a 22, 06, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and you can look back and see exactly what's in each of those. Most of them were little tiny tweaks. The one thing that I did want to talk about though, we did, so when we launched the new functionality for faceting, one of the issues is that some of the facet counts aren't exact and can't be, because we really don't know that like an exact count of how many things are like a book that is available at this particular branch. Once you do the search, we have those results are exact, but in terms of the actual facet counts for display, we don't know that ahead of time. And basically it's just an issue of how much pre-processing we do. And for like, if we only had 3 facets and you had books, movies, and music, and that was it, then maybe we could do it. But as soon as we start having libraries with 150 branches and 50 different formats, it gets to take a lot of time to go through and kind of predetermine all of that so that we can basically predict and say like, hey, if I go through and select things that are available now with a format of, let's just say book, like how many of those are exactly are also then something else. So the results are correct. This count is correct, the 7, but if we clicked back to main library, then we like here it's showing that there's 2,997. And that's just not right. So there's really fewer than that. And that's just how things combine together. So one of the things we realized is, well, we didn't want to show, so there's no books that are available online because ebooks are available online, not books. So instead of trying to predict all of those, which gets really, really hard, we launched it with the display of a tilde. And some people didn't like that because they were like, looks a lot like a negative sign. So we added some options. So we added the ability, so instead of showing all counts, which is the default, you can also choose to show exact counts only. So when we save that, then as soon as we don't know exactly how many are selected, so as soon as we start applying some of the formats and we say, okay, let's add our large print titles here. There's no large print that are available online. So these ones, we know there's 6 large print in the entire collection. That one is the correct count. And we know how many are available now and that kind of thing. But we don't necessarily know some of the others. So you can remove those counts, or you can choose to remove all counts. So as we looked more and more at how other sites that had equally complex kind of filters that we do did things, we noticed that most of them aren't showing any facet counts anymore. So if we just do a blank search again, like if we look at like Target and like a lot of the other like big complex shopping sites, they've kind of stopped showing facet counts and just show the number of results. So we're giving you the ability to do that as well. So if you wanted to say, hey, we don't like, it's not as useful to show total number of counts just because of how everything interacts, these numbers are always correct. We gave you that option as well. Then we had a 220610 release. This was for EBSCOhost. We had a library that needed to go live on EBSCOhost before 2207 was going to be available, so we put it into a .10 release. We showed a lot of EBSCOhost integration last time. We've made quite a few updates just to make it a little bit more user-friendly and also give y'all as librarians a little more power to control the results. And some of that was just as we went from our test profile to the real profiles that you all have, there's a lot more databases and stuff that we needed to account for. So now when you set up your EBSCOhost settings, assuming the profile ID and password are correct, and we're still working, we've got a couple of libraries that are figuring out how to get those. There may be places in your admin interface that look like profile IDs and passwords that aren't quite right. So as soon as these are correct, you will get an automatic set of default search settings. Those will populate with a list of all of the databases you own, or all of the databases you have access to. And this updates anytime you edit the settings. One of the things we noticed is not everything has date and relevancy sorting. And if a title doesn't have date and relevancy sorting, basically the way EBSCOhost displays results back is more or less by database. So it kind of picks one, gives you all of those results, moves on to the next one. And it's not the world's best patron experience. So by default, we turn off the search by default. You can also decide if you want to allow searching of that. So in this case, we've tweaked it and we've said, hey, the image collection might be valuable for somebody to see, but we don't want to search it by default because it doesn't have that date and relevancy sort. You can also choose which ones show and explore more, and those show up as individual databases, and we'll show an example of that in a minute. And then whether or not they show in combined results. And combined results is just going to show all databases. So we'd recommend that, or all results from all of the selected databases. So we'd recommend that you pick something with a date and relevancy sort. The other thing that I'm going to show real quick before we show results, if you edit these, you do have the ability to upload a logo. And that logo then is going to show in the Explore More results. So let's do some searching. So if I do a search, I'm just going to do a search for Aspen trees in the database, in articles and databases. It's going to, by default, select those. And we've got our list of different facets that apply to everything that is selected. So as we go through and change which sources, so if we said we only want to search Medline, we're going to get a different set of subjects than if we said, like, let's search the image collection. So there we can see those images. And in this case, they have no facets. So let's go back to searching Medline. For authentication, we are validating that the patron is either logged in or that they are at an IP. So in the IP address settings within Aspen, there's a new column that you can say treat this as automatically authenticated for EBSCOhost. And if so, it'll send people straight over without asking them to authenticate within Aspen. So inside your buildings, you can do that. And then clicking on any of these will take you over to EBSCOhost where you can read the full text of the article. So, or whatever information they have available. If we do the search, so we'll just do a same search for Aspen trees in the library catalog. It takes a little bit sometimes. So depending on how many different sources you have selected in Explore More, probably keep that under like 5 or so within the Explore More, just so it doesn't take like 3 minutes to load the Explore More. Clicking on any of these then will do the same thing. You can go in and if you click on that, that takes you to all of the results for master file complete, where you can facet down and do more on that. We can look at our forests and forestry. And then the combined results, same thing. We can do a search there. This gives us our articles and databases. This has everything selected for combined results. So I had the image search checked on for combined results. We see those there. That takes us over as well to all of those results. Any quick questions on EBSCOhost? Or we'll keep moving. So then in 2207, we've done, so I'll just go to the 2207 results here. So we've got lots of stuff. Jordan talked about Aspen Lita. We've got some browse category updates that I think will be really cool for people. So in our themes, we now have the ability in the browse category section. Down here, we can say, how big do you want those images to be? We've got a library working on displaying Aspen on like some big TV screens or big display walls, and the medium size image just doesn't cut it. So you can now tweak those up to be large. And you can change the image layout. Some people don't like the masonry layout so here is, oops, that's showing the grid. Let's refresh that. We'll go back to the settings that we had. So here is medium size with the masonry layout. And we can see that basically it's trying to keep a constant top bottom or constant spacing between the covers, but that means that the bottom kind of gets wavy. Some people really want that to be just straight lines. So you can now say, we can say this is large, and instead of masonry, we're going to make that a grid. And when we refresh, those are now a grid. The other thing we do is we lose the border around it. Just it looked a little bit better without that border when you were in grid layout. And then these images are a little bit bigger. So as we make the screen bigger, they get a little bit bigger. The other factor that can control some of that to play with is, so in browse category groups, if you're showing the rating stars or not. So that's another factor that controls kind of how big those look. But some new images to play with, or new layouts to play with for those browse categories. Other things that we did. So people have noticed that Overdrive, some of the brand new titles that you ordered don't show up immediately within Aspen. So we talked with Overdrive about this, and they said, "Oh yeah, we like don't actually give you those." So they gave us a new API to detect everything that's been recently added to the catalog, and we implemented this time. So now, as soon as you purchase something, it will show up within Aspen. Before, it had to get checked out in order to show up. So that's a change that we are happy to do, and it was nice working with Overdrive on that. We also added the ability to define custom mark fields to be included within the index. I'm not gonna like demo this really, but I'll show you where the setting is. So if we go into indexing profiles, there's now the ability to say, there are additional mark 0xx and 9xx fields to index as keywords. So basically you could say here, if you want to put in your 903 subfield B, you could do that. Or if you wanted 903 A and B, you could do that. And then if you also wanted the 901A, you can do that. By default, we index everything from 100 to, I think actually from 10, well, 100 up to 900 are in the keyword index by default. So, but also a lot of like the ISBNs and UPCs get in there. Yeah, so 100 through 899 are shown by default. So if you want something above that or below that, you can index that specifically. A lot of the other ones, so like we will include UPCs and ISBNs, that kind of thing in the keyword search. But there's some other ones that are weird in there that you can do. We also added the ability to show, so one of the complaints we've had or concerns that people have brought to us is people that use closed captioning and need an easy way to figure out if something is closed captioned without like going into the notes and reading the notes to figure out, is it really closed caption? So we're looking at some of that information. And now when you expand the editions, it's going to show the closed caption button or a closed caption icon with the physical description. And if you go into that specific record, we're showing that as well next to the format as well as the physical description. So hopefully those users that need closed captioning can find that more easily now. Couple more things. These are just the highlights. So libraries that have Xbox Series X games, they were being identified as just Xbox or Xbox 360 games. They're now Xbox Series X. We also updated the last, so one of the issues some of our libraries were having was when we're checking reading history, we were previously the last scene date within Koha was getting updated. So basically reading history updates every night, and therefore Koha thought that a person that had never been to the library was, or hadn't been to the library in a year, was still visiting daily because we were updating their reading history. So we're not doing that anymore. So if you have stats that are dependent upon the last update date within Koha, that should no longer update. We also did just some cleanup. So there were some my favorite lists that were empty that were just getting duplicated. So we cleaned all that up. Cleaned up some when like lists get deleted, we're deleting that. We also fixed an issue with when you're sorting additions, there were problems sorting by hold ratio. So those are cleaned up now to make sure that we're really distributing holds across all of your titles. So if you have two different editions of a book, it'll make sure that it's going to try to equalize the hold ratio between those, all other things being equal. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, just again, another little cleanup thing. If you have a web builder page, a custom page that you've embedded a form within, when you're editing the form, we're just not going to show the fields. So don't be surprised when it shows you that the fields aren't being shown. And we're just doing that because like we had some weird cases where people would have like a required field on a form and it would like force you to fill out the form within the page you were editing and gets really goofy. So we're not doing that anymore. But that are the big highlights of everything in 2207. We're going to push that out to test versions and anybody in implementations tonight. So if you have any issues or have any feedback, please let us know. And then we'll push it to everybody's production servers next Tuesday. With that, I will turn it back to Morgan.